Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is the third Multifamily Chronicles live event. And today I have not one, but two guests. My guests today are Kara Rice and Jen Piccotti from Swift Bunny. Welcome to the show, ladies, and happy Valentine to you and everybody in the audience.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, Adrian.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Kara, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about some great things that are currently happening at Swift Bunny to kick this episode off.
Thank you so much. Well, I believe this is my third invitation to chat with you on your shows, Adrian. So I'm really, really grateful for that. And it's super fun to see so many familiar faces in the room. So thanks to all of you for carving time out of your day and choosing to spend it here with us. Here at Swift Bunny, great things that are happening. Just really happy to have turned the page over here to 2023. And the thing I'm most excited about is what you've invited us here to talk about today, which is our newest research report, and we'll get into that. But the other thing I'm excited about is getting back on the road and getting to see some of you folks right here, gathered here today, except I get to see you in person. So first up on my list of travels is the Texas Apartment Association conference in April, and I can't wait to be there.
Jen, why don't you share with us, things that you have in a hopper, things that you have going on with your company and outside, like, events that you're participating in. Where should we expect to run into you soon?
Oh, we've got some fun things coming up. As Kara said, we've got TAA coming up. We're going to be working with some individual companies. So I'm going to be traveling out to Denver and possibly the Apartment Association of Metro Denver. And then, of course, we're going to be having a whole lot of fun at Apartmentalize in June. So we look forward to really having some great interactions with everyone out there.
I can't wait to welcome you all to Atlanta this year, because that's where I live. So that'll be a super fun experience, and it's going to be the first one for me. I never been to a NA conference before, so
it's going to be fun.
Kara, I want to turn to you and ask you the first question. 2023 Employee Engagement Risk Report. Tell us about, what is this report about, and what are the findings? Well, we're going to go over the findings later on, but tell us what is this report?
Okay, so a little bit of context. At Swift Bunny, our primary business is employee surveys. So we work with multifamily owners and operators, and we survey their employees on a year-round basis to figure out what's working well for them and what isn't, with the goal of making a very satisfying workplace. So ultimately, we're trying to help management companies with their employee retention and to drive down employee turnover. So as a byproduct of that, Jen and I have access to tons of data about how multifamily team members feel about work. And so this is our second annual risk report. The full title is the 2023 Employee Engagement Risk Report. And it's just a really fascinating look at all of the feedback we have received from employees all across the nation, every company that we work with. It's all just, we dig in and sort it according to roles, so we can see how a leasing consultant feels versus a maintenance tech versus a property manager, and really figure out what's working well and what's not working so well for folks. And by focusing on the risks, I know that seems like we're kind of taking the negative frame of mind here, but we think it's really important to find out what people are unhappy about, because it allows us to dig in and find some strategies for overcoming that can really impact employee retention. Now, if I may, Adrian, I'm going to kick it over to Jen, because I just have to give credit where it's due. She is the research head behind this. Let me tell you, that girl can finesse a spreadsheet like nobody's business. So she's the one who really did all of the digging into the data. So Jen, you may have more to add to my explanation about the report.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Before I turn it to Jen, I just wanted to say to all of you that are participating, my main reason for having the live events is to have you interact with us. So at any given point, you have a raise hand option right there. You could raise your hand. We're going to get you live to ask the questions. You could type in a question in a Q&A box or in a chat box. So feel free to use those, because again, we want to make this for you, right? You took the time to be out here. We're here to answer all of your questions. Please, Jen.
All right, thank you. And thanks, Kara, for all of those lovely compliments that, you explained it so well. And I think that what's really important when we're looking at employee feedback is there's a lot of things that as leaders, as coworkers, as supplier partners, there's a lot of things that would be nice to fix or to improve. But what we're really focusing on, what are the things that are going to have the greatest positive impact on the greatest number of employees, and really helping our industry and the clients that we work with narrow their focus, because we only have so much time, so many resources. So what's going to have the biggest positive impact on our team? And that's really what this risk report is all about.
So I know that probably you're going to find in the data. My guess is that you're finding in the data that different positions have different, I guess, angles. Also, in other words, their responses are varying based on the position that are in. Am I wrong in assuming that, Jen?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are some things that are generally the same, are very similar across all of the position categories. But we do see trends pop up where something is really on the minds of a maintenance tech, for example, and something else is really weighing down people who are in a corporate support role. And so I think it's good to identify what are the big picture items and attack those from a really specific focus, but also looking at those nuance, because oftentimes the things that are creating the biggest obstacle for our frontline team members, it's really just a matter of finding out what those small things are and having someone maybe just one layer above them clear the path or create the solution or give the approval, and they can be so much more effective and productive. So those are the fun things that are fun to find.
Now, Kara, I know that this is the second annual survey, right? That you're doing report.
Correct.
I would like to ask you, what are the differences that you see between, current data and the data from a year ago? Like, what are some significant differences? How did the industry evolve when it comes to employee feedback and all the other you're tracking?
Right. It's a great question, Adrian. I'm going to start with the bad news. And the bad news is that a lot of the topics that we found and identified as the top risks in 2022, they remain that way. Jen, would you agree with that statement?
Yes, unfortunately, there are some foundational things that continue to be a big challenge.
Yeah. So many of those risks remain. And even in spite of our shining a light on them and working with our clients to make improvements, many of those risks remain. Now, that's not to say that clients didn't make improvements on an individual basis. They certainly may have. But in the aggregate, the things that were frustrating people a year ago are still frustrating them. And I know we're only 2 years into this, but I'm starting to think, over time, perhaps we're going to see some of these issues are kind of evergreen risks to employee satisfaction. On the list, for example, you won't be surprised, I don't think, to hear is compensation. Is anybody shocked that that is a frustration year after year? Probably not. So some of those things, we see recurring in 2023, but we did have a couple of new stressors that we identified in this new report. And I think one of the biggest areas that caught our attention as newly alarming, if you will, for leaders is we actually saw rising to the top level of risks frustration with the onboarding process. So newly hired employees have a lot to say about how imperfect their first few days or first few months on the job have been. So we got some really good information on that in this report, and that's new for 2023.
One question that comes to mind, and Jen, please weigh in on it. Have you used the same metrics the prior year with this year, or have you changed some of the metrics? Do you have some that, they haven't been used? In other words, have you used the same questionnaire, the same question, so it's kind of apples to apples, or have you made any changes? And if you did, what are the changes, if you could share?
That's such a great question. And what I like is that we are looking apples to apples. These are the same questions that have been asked for multiple years now, so that we can see how things have changed. And the nice thing about this year is that we've got so much more data behind onboarding, so we have a clearer picture. So while we were still asking the same questions, we have the volume that really made it valuable and actionable this year for our clients. And a couple of other things that rose to the top that were not in the risk report last year, but have crept their way into a risk category, have to do with people feeling that they're being asked for their input to have ideas on new and better ways of doing things. They're very eager to be able to give their input and to give their expertise, and they feel like they're being underutilized in that way, because they're on the front lines. They see what's happening every day, and they just wish someone would ask their opinion and their input on, is there a better way of doing this? So that's one thing that made its appearance on the risk report. The other one had to do with getting timely feedback. And I think that there is a misconception that it's only the younger, newer employees who really want that constant feedback of how am I doing? How am I doing? But in actuality, we found this is universal across all categories, across all positions, across all levels, whether it's a new employee or a tenured employee. People really want to know, am I on the right track? Am I doing what you think that I'm supposed to be doing? And am I doing it effectively, or is there something I need to do differently? And that was a real surprising one, to see that tenured employees are just as eager, just as they want to get that feedback from their supervisor. So those are two things that really caught our attention this year.
It's very interesting. I have a follow-up question on the feedback. I just got a message in a chat box from Lila saying that in a Q&A box that the chat has been disabled. Have any of you experienced that? I see a question from Matt in a chat. So it works for him. Maybe it's just something that she can access it. Did any of you try to type in a question and you couldn't?
You know what I think it is? I think that the only ones who could do a chat is if they are made panelists. So I wonder if that's the...
Yeah, that could be, because when I pop in there, Adrian, it doesn't allow me to chat to everyone. I can only chat to hosts and panelists.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I couldn't even access chat until you made me a panelist, Adrian.
So I'm watching both boxes, the chat and also the Q&A. I know that some of you do not want to be panelists, and that's okay. But please, if one of them doesn't work, seems like the Q&A box works just fine for everybody. So let's keep it rolling. And worst case scenario, if you can't do either, raise hand. Just look on the bottom of the screen. You have a little icon right there. Just click to raise your hand and we'll get you live. So I think that solves it right for right now, I'm hoping. So Jen, the lack of feedback from the higher ups, right? I think everything starts with just the way we do evaluations. And typically it's either once or twice a year, right? They become such a burden on everybody. The supervisors hate doing them because they had to sit around and think about, what am I gonna write here? What did my
so true.
Which is not the best thing, right? I had to admit, and I had to be completely transparent and honest. I had situations where it's been challenging for me to come up with something, with a narrative for the 6 months, not because I didn't know how my employee performed, but a lot of the performance reviews are tied to company values. And you know what? For the most part, people just don't know what the values are. Like that's what makes it very, very challenging. And in all honesty and transparency, I wanted to say that was my biggest challenge, because I had to think, what the values are and how do they apply to my employees. So I do want to ask, with that being said, I wanted to ask you, Kara, is there a better way for us to provide feedback than to just once or twice a year?
Oh, you are speaking my language, Adrian. So, yeah, I think, first of all, that whole conversation topic about evaluations and doing a better job with those, we could spend a whole afternoon talking about that. But I also challenge the idea that the annual review is the only time that a supervisor ought to be offering feedback. So when we see these low scores on this question here in our surveys about timely feedback, I don't think that's limited to the performance review. I think people just want to be seen by their supervisors, and they want to have regular interactions with those supervisors. So when I go around the country and I'm doing some training sessions and talking with folks, I often ask them about the frequency with which they meet with their bosses. And it's really not all that frequent. I mean, of course, it's all across the board, but people can go days, weeks, even months, before they have interaction with their supervisor, which sounds crazy, but it isn't if you think about the way multifamily is structured, where if you're on site and your supervisor is not, and they're in a different office, they may even be in a different state, it can be a very long time before you have face-to-face interaction. So you have to really force those interactions. You have to make time when you're not just bumping into each other over the coffee pot. So that's one of the things that I always counsel folks when I'm meeting with them, is to just make sure, if you are a supervisor, that you are making the space for conversation. Not all feedback has to be formalized, right? I think that the intimacy of the relationship is improved when you try to make the space for those interactions on an everyday and a regular basis. So as a supervisor, be visible, be where your employees are so you can just bump into them and have those conversations. I think that's equally important to scheduling the more formal conversations. I'm a huge fan of one-on-one conversations, recurring one-on-one conversations for supervisors to use with their team members. So that's the more formal conversations. And then, of course, you have to sprinkle in the super formal evaluation, whatever your procedure may be. But yeah, you just really can't get enough in terms of communicating with your team members. Whatever you are doing, you should probably be doing more. And the feedback that we have seen in our employee surveys is you just flat out cannot over communicate with teams.
Yes.
I want to turn to you, Jen, right now and ask you, can you share some of the practices that some of your clients just have put in place to make this experience better for their employees? Can you give us some examples, some practical examples of how they handle that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to Kara's point, the one-on-one meeting, whether that's happening weekly or every other week, it doesn't have to be long, 15 to 30 minutes with each employee. That can be spread out over the course of the week, of just checking in. What are you working on? How's everything going? Is there anything that's getting in your way of doing your job? And just having those regular check-ins so that the employee knows, if I'm keep hitting a wall, I know I can go to my supervisor and they are going to try and help me out and find a solution. The other thing is just creating, and we've seen this at several of our clients, of creating a whole culture of compliments, because oftentimes one of the biggest complaints we hear is the only feedback I get is when I do something wrong. And that's just, how demoralizing, if you feel like if all you hear from your boss is, don't do it that way, do it this other way, you start to not want to interact with your boss. But if you can have a whole environment where the supervisor leads the way of creating compliments, and it doesn't have to be, the only complimenting the big things, but man, thanks for holding the door for Mrs. Smith. I know that she appreciates that. Her hands were full. Or thanks for taking that call for me, while I was dealing with this other thing. Or I really appreciated how you got everyone to laugh when everyone was feeling very tense right there. Those little compliments and those little reinforcements of, I see you, I appreciate you. This is what you bring to the table. This is how you lift our team up. When the supervisor is doing that on a regular basis, it sets the tone for the rest of the team to start saying, thank you, I see you, I appreciate that. And whether you say it in person or you set up a compliment wall where people write on a Post-it note back in the break room, hey, Adrian, I loved how you sent out that nice note, or you took the trash out for me when it was my day. Those things go a long way to building that culture of feedback.
I love that you brought the word culture, right? How do you build culture? Well, culture exists whether we want it or not.
Exactly.
That is an undeniable fact.
Yeah.
Now,
it's just how we do things around here. That's your culture. It's as simple as that.
I love it. I remember you said that on the first episode. It's been over a year and a half almost since we had a conversation, and you're absolutely right. You stuck with me. Now, culture could be by default because it exists. Like you don't do anything about it. It just grows like weeds, right? Weeds grow. You don't make them grow. They just grow naturally. Or you do you build a culture by design. And then I wanted to say, get your take on this, Kara, right? How do you build a culture by design where managers understand the importance of, feedback? Like Jen said, it doesn't have to be like a pre-scheduled thing. You just have to pay attention to what people are doing right versus only to what they're doing wrong. I think most of us are wired to where our default state is to just look at when someone makes a mistake versus saying, look for what they did right. I'm guilty of it often, right? So I work really hard to change that default state and say, look for what they're doing right and, praise them for it. Just say thank you. Like it really doesn't cost anything. So what can we do from a culture perspective to build that type of a culture on purpose to foster this type of environment and encourage and reward managers that are actually praising their employees often?
Right.
No.
Well, I'd love to crowdsource this. So everybody in the room, I'd love to hear what's happening in your organizations, because I'm sure that you're doing this. But I think there's thousands of things that can be done, Adrian, and many of them are top down. So focusing, having the executive leadership make that a priority. And that can come in the form of some formalized celebration, whatever the rewards programs are or the recognition programs are, making sure that they are focused on the things that you really care about. In this case, to your point, it may be about lifting employees up and making the workplace a positive experience. You just want to make sure that that's where the focus is. There's a quote that I love from that book and movie, The Art of Racing in the Rain, and it says your car goes where your eyes go. So if you're only focused on what people are doing wrong, then that's all that's going to happen in your workplace. But if you also celebrate and shine the spotlight on what's going right, then I think you're going to see more of that. So make sure that it's not just about delinquent rent and vacancy problems and all of that, but also be focusing on the positive things that are happening as well. And it's got to happen at the leadership level, but it can also happen. There's a lot, I think, that is in the control of the individual workplace manager. So that could be the property manager or the maintenance supervisor, because that community is almost like their own little kingdom. And, the company may have a culture, but that workplace has a culture too. And it might be completely different from what the corporate culture is. Would you agree with that, Adrian?
I actually love that you're bringing it up. And my theory about this, right, is that there's many type of cultures within our organization. A culture as a whole, which is everybody's behavior, everybody that belongs to that company, to that group behavior, and that's macro. And then micro, it's the group that you're a part of. And micro could be the community that you're working at, or it could be also something in between that's actually a region. I've seen a lot of the regional managers, they're driving culture, and you could tell by the different personalities that each regional establishes a certain type of culture within their group. And they could be like totally opposite from one person to the other, from one portfolio to the other. Some people might have an experience that they absolutely love, and others that belong to a different, report to a different regional manager might end up hating being there. So
Yep.
do you disagree? Do you see this type of cultures being present?
100%. That has been my experience, 100%. And so, yeah, working in one region versus working in another could be a night and day.
We have Jeff right there with a hand raised. Jeff, would you like to go live and ask the question?
Yeah, sure. It's really more of a question with a statement. We did something very similar to what you're talking about to reinforce the when someone does something well. In the thing, we had a really cheesy, like, first place, plastic gold cup that we filled with gold coins, those chocolate covered, the foil cup chocolate coins. And when someone saw something happening, like someone was on the phone, they helped walk somebody through fixing something, or they talked someone through understanding what their lease was on. So if someone heard it, they would go to that thing, pick up the coin, walk to their desk, put it on their desk, and said, "We heard what you said. We really appreciate it," in front of everyone. So it brought everyone into it, and became kind of it was kind of cheesy, but it really worked well, because they all, as a group, would start doing it. It wasn't just for anything, but they had to actually see something that met our culture, met what we do, and then actually doing something really good. So it was always positive reinforcement. And then as a group, each of the different offices would vote on who would be the employee of the month, and that cheesy cup would go on their desk for that month, and people had to come get a point out of it. But it moved around the office that way. We had some people that got really common. Got a gold painted toilet, little mini toilet that I put on their desk. They would move that around. It was a joke about it, but it was all the whole reason. They would actually get involved and bring that coin to somebody, put it on their desk in front of everyone, and say, "I heard what you said. That was a great way of talking about that," or "That was really good talking to the lady. She didn't understand. She's not computer literate. You helped." But those type of things.
Oh, I love that. That is so great, because it makes it doesn't have to be like overly over, it can be those little things where it's just that moment of, "I see you, I heard you, and that was great. Thanks for doing that." And I love that.
And it was the whole office. It
wasn't
the manager, it was the whole office. That was the big thing.
Yeah.
You could do it.
That's a wonderful example there, Jeff, and thank you very much for sharing. We had a comment from Patty. She said that stay interviews, 30, 60, and 90-day stay interviews, help. So, Kara, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, actually, I was going to see whether Patty wants to fill us in. If you're willing, Patty, I'm wondering, is that a formalized requirement, something you guys do, or is it just something that some managers do?
We've actually been training this for, I think I maybe started talking about this several years ago at NAA, but the importance of the feedback all through, because everybody knows when somebody new starts working with you in a certain position, it may be 30 days before they really see what's going on in the office. And just to sit down with them and say, "How's it going?" And also to say, you got to know that when we're all trying to get the same people when we're hiring. And it's
of course.
And so you've got to know that you are walking that talk, that whatever you said in that interview is coming across to that new employee as how it is. Well, sometimes I think we find, and we have to be prepared for the answers if we say, "How's it going? Is this what you thought it would be?" And you have to be prepared for them to say, "Well, not exactly." But this gives you the opportunity to fix it. If you're waiting till the end of the year to do a review, it's too late. And it also gives you an opportunity to say, "Is there anything else that you've seen since you've been here that you would like to do?" And this helps in that cross training and those kind of things and builds your team and builds the structure. So I actually typed that in when we were talking about feedback, but you know me, Kara, I could talk about that for forever and ever. I would like to mention one thing that we do after Jeff talked about his company, but we are trying to be really big on recognition. And we have, in fact, next week, we have a Leadership Appreciation Day. That's for our managers and our service directors. And we do things like the team decorates the office. We bring in breakfast for them. Their prizes. We get notes from vendors and residents alike and corporate office people just to say thank you. And we have one of those appreciation days for every position. So we'll have leasing appreciation day and we'll, maintenance appreciation day. So we're in our third year of doing these, and it's just become such a big deal. And people just really, it's sometimes it's hard to stop and say thank you because people are so busy. It's not that they don't want to, it's they get so busy. And is it right? No. But we want to make sure that we're at least stopping what we're doing and saying thank you by doing these appreciation days. And I was just going to share that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing, Patty.
Welcome.
Trey, you had a comment. Do you are in a position to go live and ask your question?
I'm sorry. Were you talking to me?
Trey King.
Oh.
If you're not ready, that's okay. I could actually ask the question for you on your behalf. So Trey asked a very interesting question. How about creative ways to do it, like random pop-up surveys for a manager to answer a question that then aggregate for a quick meeting bi-yearly, twice a year? Would that be something that there's value in it? Jen, do you think?
Yeah, these are actually some of the things that we're exploring, so that, when a supervisor is going out throughout the year, at the end of the year, they're trying to, make notes in the evaluation. They're trying to remember, what were the things that that this employee did or the impact that they made. I think there's a lot of value to that type of program, just to kind of help jog your memory throughout the year. But I think, the other way to accomplish that is to have those touch bases on a regular basis and make notes in those meetings of things that are going really well, things that the employee had questions about. I think the primary thing is, as Patty said, just helping people feel seen and being ready to take that feedback on what's going well and what's not going the way you thought that it should. But I really like that idea, Trey.
Next, I want to turn this over to you, Kara. And you did mention that compensation is still probably the top, the number one concern. So I will ask you to elaborate on, the nuances of compensation, and then also to share with the group, what are some things that you see your clients actually doing based on the feedback that your company provides, like some practical stuff that they're coming up with to overcome the compensation issue?
Great. Yeah, absolutely. It's, high on the list as it was last year. And I really feel like it's not a surprise that folks are dissatisfied with compensation. However, I think what's changed is we can't just accept that any longer and be like, yeah, whoever thinks that they're getting paid too much, right? I really think that in this day and age, when we're facing such a dire labor shortage, we can't dismiss the concerns around compensation any longer, because if we do, we're going to find ourselves with a lot more empty seats, and that's not a position anybody can afford to be in. So it's a very, very complex challenge. I get it. Budgets are not unlimited. And so it's really difficult to structure a compensation package for every member of your team that makes you the most competitive employer on the block. So that's really, I think, what companies are wrestling with today. the added challenge, I think, is because we are in such a labor shortage, that your people are being recruited from here, there, and everywhere, and not just within our industry, but from jobs outside of our industry that might possibly seem more attractive. They may not have to service their customers 24/7 like we do in multifamily, for example. So you're facing a lot of pressure, a lot of competitive offers for your team members. And I know this isn't news to anybody here who manages a team. But we are hearing feedback in our surveys, such as a lot of sentiment that there's a resentment among experienced team members, that new hires are being brought in at higher wages than those who are experienced, especially when you're seeing in markets that are using like signing bonuses, sign-on bonuses, if you will, to bring people in. That really chaps the existing folks who didn't get one of those and aren't going to get one of those. And then you bring in the green employee who gets this, giant sign-on bonus or a higher wage. So it's really, really challenging. I will say that we have seen some cases of employers who have bumped up existing team members, bumped up their payroll to try to make it more competitive for what they're having to pay new hires. I totally understand that that's hard to do. It's prohibitively expensive for many companies. We have also seen some creative approaches, because compensation is not just salary, it's the whole package, right? So that's where I think we've seen some clients really making inroads. I want to share, for example, there's a group out of Atlanta called One Street Residential, and they made a number of small changes. Each individual change is fairly small, but it adds up to a lot in terms of satisfaction for the team members. So they took a look at, through their surveys and through their conversations with team members, they took a look at things that were bugging people. One of the things they found was they had a program for their career apparel, and the employees were being charged for that. So money was taken out of their paycheck to go towards career apparel. And the team members were just ticked off about that. They really hated that. And so leadership decided, that's a small thing we can fix. And so they stopped charging people for the career apparel. And in fact, they went back and gave refunds for previous months for that. And, people celebrated. It was like, okay, awesome, you listened. Now, that's not enough for somebody to, pay a whole lot of their bills on, but it's a little something that they could do. And they did a number of those types of things. Another one was taking a look, I think, at mileage reimbursement, specifically for on-call maintenance. So I think there was a change made there. And I know they had some sort of a celebration on Apartment Teams Day where every member of the team got a gas card. And you will remember when gas prices were sky high, that was really well appreciated by the team members. So smaller things like that can help folks feel valued and put a little bit more money for them at the end of the pay period, put a little bit more money in their pocket. And Jen, I think that you have some experience with some clients who have made some impactful changes surrounding benefits, perhaps, or total compensation. Do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, one of the things that has really been useful for so many of our clients is implementing a total compensation statement and just creating transparency around the total dollar amount that a company invests in each individual employee. Because most people, they can tell you, well, this is what my salary is, or this is what my hourly wage is. And maybe they can tell you what their bonus structure is, but they might not be able to tell you what the company pays towards their 401k matching, or what they pay towards your insurance. So a total compensation really lays out line item by line item. Here's what the company invests in you. And I think for a lot of employees, it's kind of a aha moment of like, oh, I didn't realize, I thought my compensation was X, but it's actually about 10, 15, 20% higher than the number I had in my head, because I wasn't taking into account all of these other things the company does for me. And what's helpful about that is that when they see everything that the company covers, if they're tempted to go somewhere else, now they have some new questions to ask. Well, do you cover this? Do you cover this? And even though maybe they could get $1 or $2 more per hour, what they're losing is a certain kind of benefit or something else. So that helps add more nuance to the conversation if they're considering that. The other thing is, I've worked with some clients who think that their benefits package is amazing. I was working with one company where they got really dinged on this topic of benefits. And the CEO was in the room and he's like, I don't understand this. We have the best benefits coverage. Our health insurance is amazing. It takes care of everything. And so I challenged him on that. And I said, well, what is your participation rate in health insurance, for example? And they found that for the on-site teams, the participation in health insurance was very, very low. And I said, okay, let's take a look at that. For you and for your salary at a CEO, president, executive level, the percentage of the health insurance that you have to pay is very small. But for someone who maybe is a leasing agent or a maintenance tech, the percentage of their take-home pay that they have to put towards their insurance premiums, that's a big chunk of their monthly salary. And so, as many of their comments said in the survey, they would have to either choose between health insurance for their family or, meat on the table. And so that's a decision that a lot of people they're not willing to sacrifice the meat on the table. So that was really eye-opening for that particular set of executives, and they went back and changed their insurance offerings to make it more competitive and more accessible to a larger percentage of their employees. And that was a huge win for them. And that factors into that compensation conversation.
So I just want to piggyback a little bit on that, Jen, and ask you, in your surveys, how big of an issue is the benefit part? Jeff asked the question, are you finding that benefits are also a concern? Like, generally speaking, is it across the board?
You know what? It is, I would say 50-50. There are some companies that are doing it really very well, and they score very well when it comes to benefits. And then there's the other half of the industry where there's a lot of work and a lot of opportunity, especially when it comes to maternity and paternity benefits, having coverage that's accessible for the family. It may be very affordable for the employee themselves, but when they want to add their family on, it's absolutely prohibitive. And that's scary, especially for single parents, where they are the sole provider of insurance and they are absolutely not able to provide coverage for their children. That's a scary situation for them to be in. That may absolutely cause them to go elsewhere. So I feel like there's a definite split. It's a huge opportunity for companies who are getting feedback from their team members that, benefits, I can't make it on the benefits that you're offering.
Hey, Adrienne, may I chime in here? Another piece that we see a lot of conversation around under the big umbrella of benefits is time off, paid time off. And I'm seeing that that's an area where, again, companies are trying to be competitive, but can't necessarily afford to boost everybody's salaries or boost them as much as folks want them to be boosted. But an area that I've seen more companies take liberties with is the paid time off. They may be able to add additional days off. That might be a way that they can feel like they're boosting the total compensation package a little bit. And that is always met with celebration by teams because it's so appreciated for folks to have more flexibility in their schedule. So additional paid days off, floating holidays, anything along those lines, I think it can really go a long way with teams as well.
That brings me to a question coming from the PTO, from the time of question. I'm sure that you experience some of your clients that are advertising unlimited time off. Do you?
I don't know of anybody who's offering that, any specific company that's offering that. Jen, do you?
No, there's one that was considering it. The challenge, though, that really comes down to is, again, accessibility. It's one thing, whether you have 5 days of PTO available or unlimited days of PTO, can I actually use it? Do I feel that I can actually take the time off? And there's a couple of factors that go into it. One is if you're so short-staffed, and as an employee, I'm looking at my team saying, oh man, I don't feel like I can take more than 1 day off, this year, because if I leave, I'm going to put all this burden on my team members, and I like my team members and I don't want to stress them out. So I'm going to just, burn myself out because I feel like I can't take my days off, and I could have all kinds of days available. The other thing that causes a lot of obstacles is I've got to give 30 days notice for when I want to take my day off. Well, you know what? Sometimes things come up. Sometimes I am at my wit's end and I really do need to take a day off tomorrow. If I have to give 30 days notice, that doesn't seem like it's in reach at all. And so again, I could have, a month's worth of vacation time stocked up. But if I have to give such far ahead notice, if I don't feel like I've got the team support or availability, then no matter how much PTO you are offering, it doesn't matter because I feel like I can't use it. So that's a big factor in that as well.
Angela made a very interesting comment. She's saying that we have unlimited for corporate and accrual for on-site teams. Do you want to go live and just kind of tell us a little bit about, how does that work, the unlimited part, unlimited PTO?
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon.
Hey, Angela.
Hello. Yeah, so we have actually been operating this for quite some time. For our corporate team, we do unlimited. We prefer to call it a flexible PTO plan. And to your point, it is very much that same exact situation, Jen, where team members, they're allowed to take as much time off as they need. However, we had to put into our policy that they are required to at least unplug completely 10 days of the year, because I saying the same myself as the human resource director for the company, was very much guilty of just working throughout my entire vacation. Whenever I would go anywhere, I was always still accountable to my position. I would stop off and check emails or reply to Teams chats or whatnot. So we had to put in a 10-day unplug requirement. Now with our on-site teams, we do a 14-day PTO plan. It is an accrual. We also front load a 3-day sick leave plan in addition. We did that to answer some of our woes of COVID post the federal offering for time off. So that's kind of the way we worked that particular leave plan. I will say people are scared of the quote unquote unlimited PTO plan. How do you keep your teams from running rogue? But if you have teams that are truly engaged, which is what our entire topic has been about today, then you will find that sometimes they're actually overly engaged. You have to instead encourage them to take that break that you need. And Jen, I loved your comment, because I think this is where we as employers sometimes really miss the mark, is encouraging teams to that it is okay to say, you know what, today's the day. I got to unplug. I got to have a break. And so we don't put a requirement of a 30-day notice. We do ask teams to be respectful of certain times that are going on within our organization. For instance, right now we're in quarterly financials. And so all of our teams are aware that today might not be the best day to be taking off, but they do have to put in a request to their manager. And the manager, of course, has all opportunity to deny that request and say, hey, could you push this to a different day? We don't post onto our company calendar that we will be off until that has been approved. So hope that is of help.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was very helpful. Thank you, Angela.
Sure.
Hugely helpful. I've got to say, Angela, I'm wowed by the requirement that folks unplug and for 10 days a year. I have honestly never heard of an employer that makes that a requirement. I think it's brilliant. Because what you're doing is setting that culture. The culture is you don't have to be accountable to your position on your day off. We got that covered for you. And in so many workplaces, that's not the case.
Absolutely. And Kara, it's just a matter of getting teams to really do that. Maybe I'm just super fortunate with the team that I have right now, but I've been in 3 organizations where I've run an unlimited or flexible PTO plan, and I've had the same situation occur. And so coming into this particular company, when we were crafting our PTO plan, I kind of knew, okay, look, yeah, we have really good performers. And we appreciate that, but we also recognize. And by the way, that's not 10 consecutive days. That's just 10 days per the year that you really, truly unplug. So on that company calendar, you must mark it that this is actually an unplugged day, and then turn your team's notifications or out of office, reminder on. So.
Love it.
Next topic that I want to touch on, and I'll start with you, Kara, is unreasonable workloads. Of course, we discussed staff shortages, right? When you're budgeted to have 6 people on staff, but you actually have 3 bodies doing all the work right there, or they had to pick up some serious slack, right? So their workload increases sometimes to levels that are completely unreasonable. Would you like to tell us how does that reflect in surveys, and what are some ways that maybe some of your clients are dealing with that situation?
It absolutely, it comes to the top of the list among risks is these unreasonable workloads. Again, I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. I think that our industry, the apartment industry, was stressful even pre-COVID. And then here comes 2020 and the world went topsy-turvy. And especially for on-site folks and the regional staff that were supporting them, I mean, everything just got that much harder. And then follow that up with a labor shortage and, being short-staffed, as you point out, Adrienne, it's just really, really difficult for teams to get their work done. So yes, for the second year in a row, unreasonable workloads is one of the top risks that we see that's driving folks out the door. So the specific topics that we tie to this are responses to questions like, can my work be typically completed in the time allowed? Do I have the necessary resources, tools, and technologies to do my job well? So that's a piece that I think we've already spoken a great deal about communication, but communication is required in order to dig in with team members about what are the resources that you need, what are the tools that you don't have, what technology is making your life harder instead of easier. You can only unearth that stuff with good communication between supervisors and team members. Another piece that we put in that same umbrella under unreasonable workload is about policies and procedures. You might be surprised to hear that team members are really frustrated when policies and procedures are not consistently enforced. That just leads to chaos, and they resent, that other teams or other members of the team are not being held to the same standards, perhaps, that they are. And that is a contributor to dissatisfaction with the workload. One strategy that I've seen, and I know Jen's got more to share, but one strategy that I've seen employed that I think is really, really interesting is for leaders to reconsider the work hours. So, for example, there is a group out of Atlanta that took a look at what employees were saying, and they were getting a lot of dissatisfaction from the on-call maintenance team members about how many evenings they've got to come out and support their residents. So they initiated this pilot program where they shifted the work hours. And I think what they shifted to was something like noon to 9 p.m. for the on-call service tech. And it turns out that that was a work schedule that they really loved. It just worked really well for the team members. And it also meant that a lot of those service requests, which tend to come in, at least in this portfolio, tended to come in the evening hours when residents are getting home from work. They could manage those during their workday because their workday went until 9 p.m. So it satisfied the team members, and it's also good for the company because it reduces the amount of overtime they have to pay. So flexible arrangements like that particular arrangement may not work for every portfolio, but it worked for this one, and it helped to make the workload seem a little bit more reasonable and accomplish their goals.
the career path uncertainty, it's another risk
Oh, yeah.
that you have listed in your report.
Mhm.
And would you like to share some of the details on that particular topic, on that particular risk?
Yeah, that, there's so much around that unreasonable workload, and a couple of the things that we've seen be really useful and helpful for clients is doing a really simple survey of each of their position categories, like just for leasing, and saying, what is your biggest challenge in your workday that's getting in the way of you getting your work done? Maintenance, what's the biggest obstacle that's getting in your way? And like I mentioned earlier, oftentimes they're finding something that's very simple. We had one portfolio, I think it was the Morgan Group. Their leasing agents were having a lot of frustration of just gathering the data they needed from their tours, getting it all compiled in an easy, manageable way. And so they did a survey. What's your biggest obstacle? What would be most helpful? And it turned out having a tablet or iPad available to them that could connect to Wi-Fi so that they could take their notes and input the information while they were on tour. And they said, oh, well, we can do that. They got the iPads to them almost immediately. And the leasing agents were, hooray, they were so happy about it because now they could collect the information and get it transferred to, their reporting system more easily. So just asking, making it easy to gather all the information from all of your team members of just what is your biggest obstacle. Oftentimes it's a common obstacle that someone can either get out of the way or provide the assistance or the approval needed. The other thing that we really saw, especially from COVID, there was a lot of centralization happening through technology. We have a technology solution. We have this technology solution. And so in the moment when everyone was not able to come into an office, these technologies made a lot of sense. Since then, though, now that we're back to more familiar modes of business, those technologies have not been reevaluated. And so the companies that are going back and saying, okay, we implemented all of these different things, are they doing what they were intended to do? Sometimes they find out, yes, it's working really well. That's really helpful. But a lot of times they're finding, no, it's not helpful. It's actually adding to the workload now. It's not doing what we intended it to do. It's creating double or even triple work. And so going back and being able to say, you know what, we tried it. We're going to cancel that. We tried that. We're going to cancel that. That evaluation is going a long, long way and helping the on-site teams.
Putting time back into people's day, it's a big deal.
Huge. It's huge.
It's immense. Because it allows them to actually do other things that otherwise, they never get around to do it, or they had to do it halfway because they had to cut corners because it's just so much going on. Kara, I wanted to ask you next, what do you see in the surveys in your report? What do you see regards to the lack of opportunities for employees to learn, grow, and progress? I have personal experience with this because I do quite a bit of polling on LinkedIn, and that comes up, one of the top reasons for people to be frustrated, to look for other opportunities because they can't find within their current environment enough opportunities to grow, to move up. What are your surveys saying about those topics?
Yeah, so it turns out a lot of folks feel like you do, Adrian. They want to progress. They want to be able to move up, and they get very frustrated when they don't feel like that can happen within their own organization. It's a real source of frustration for folks. And so a couple of things here. One thing that we found very, very interesting is we're seeing that employees are saying, I just don't, I don't know what my progress path, my career progression path looks like within this organization. It's murky for me. And then, interestingly, we talk to leaders, executives within those same organizations, and we find out one specific thing. Are you sharing promotion opportunities? Are those made available to everybody in your team? Are you sharing when there are openings? And they say yes. In fact, we had greater than 70%, I think, of organizations that we work with say, yes, we broadcast those openings to the whole organization. But something like a third of employees say, I have no idea what the openings are in this organization. So there's a disconnect there. And that's a little aha moment, I think is easy to fix if you just do a better job of sharing open positions within your organization, making sure that it's, a subject in a staff meeting at least once a month, for example, just putting some parameters around how you're communicating that, doing it more frequently and using more methods of communicating those openings. But the other thing that I see as an opportunity for folks is to really make sure that it's clear to team members what it takes to get promoted within the organization, because we don't want anybody to move on. We want them to stay with us. We don't want them to think they have to take a different job at a different organization in order to progress. So you want to make it really clear what it takes to get promoted within your organization. And I've seen some companies do a really great job of that. One that comes to mind is the Bainbridge companies. They're down here in South Florida, and they have something called Pathways to Promotion. So it is just spelled out. The training opportunities are made available, and they're just itemized for team members, so they know exactly what training they need to take, what experiences they must have under their belt in order to be eligible for promotion. So it's not a mystery to them. And furthermore, they celebrate when an individual has achieved what they call that pathway to promotion graduation. So that person knows that they are now eligible when opportunities arise, but also, they're feeling kind of that love and attention from leadership along the way, just for having achieved that pathway towards promotion. So I think strategies like that are really smart, and they keep employees engaged within their current company and keep them from thinking that the grass is greener elsewhere.
We all know that the first impression matters, right? It's a very well known fact that a resident makes up their mind if they're going to renew the lease and sign another one at the time of move-in, right? How is that different for employees, or is it different? I actually don't think it is. So that brings me to the topic that I want to wrap up this conversation with, and that is the topic of onboarding. And what are the things that we're seeing when it comes to onboarding that are not so great as far as first experience for new employees? So Jen, I want to turn to you on that, and what are the findings? What are your surveys finding when it comes to onboarding, things that could be done better?
Yeah, I think you are spot on when you talk about residents have that first impression, and in those first days and weeks of moving in, they're already thinking, I could see staying here for a long time, or I'm out of here when my lease is done. Employees are the exact same way. And what we're really seeing right now is there's a lot of ghosting happening. There's a lot of people who aren't showing up on their second or third day of work. And we have a super high turnover in the first 90 days. And one of the main findings that has come up is new employees saying, I'm not given time to complete training during work hours. So they're thrown into the frying pan, but they're just kind of like thrown out there and abandoned. We heard of one leasing agent. He was got the job, came to the leasing office. They handed him a set of master keys and a map and said, all right, good luck. We're glad you're here. He was left by himself. He's never been a leasing agent before. He doesn't know what the process is. He doesn't know what you do. And so that kind of situation is really scary. Now, some companies, they want to focus on training right away. And so they throw them into fair housing training and sexual harassment training. Okay, so now they have training on what not to do, but what am I supposed to be doing? And so finding that time and space for an employee to get those initial building blocks, having a clear understanding, and this is what every company needs to do. What are 2 or 3 things that we can train an employee on immediately so that they can start feeling like they're a contributing member, so they can start feeling productive? They maybe don't need to know how to do everything in the first week, but tell them how to answer the phone, show them the tour route, maybe even show them how to cut keys, anything where they can really feel productive and helpful to the rest of the team, that gets their feet wet. But really allowing them time to be able to complete training during working hours. It's really not fair, and it's really not appropriate to say, okay, here's the link to all the training. When you go home tonight after work, you can do the training. No. They need to be trained on the job, and introducing them to other people, maybe in the same role or maybe within their same team, who they can feel comfortable going to with questions and saying, how do I do this? Or where do I find that? Those are important connections to have in that job. Because the other thing that we hear, along with not having the time for training, what we're hearing is the training provided hasn't helped me feel productive, or hasn't helped me feel like I know what I'm supposed to be doing. So have a clear plan of what is it that they're supposed to be doing in their work, and then finding that time and those tactics and those people to ensure they know how to do those things, because no one likes to feel stupid. Everyone knows that in your first week on the job, you're going to feel uncertain, and we're willing to put up with that for an amount of time. But there reaches a point where it's like, I cannot go on feeling incompetent for days and weeks on end. I need to feel like I know how to do something here. So if whatever we can do to help our employees, especially our new employees, feel like you are a valuable and productive contributing member of the team, those are the things that are going to help them stay engaged and for a longer period of time.
I couldn't say this better. Thank you very much, Jen. And with this being said, we're approaching wrapping up this conversation. Thank you very much to all of you that contributed, that raised hands. Unfortunately, we couldn't answer all the questions. I wanted to go over the main findings of this report before we finish the conversation. So I needed to rush things a little bit. Kara, any closing thoughts of this conversation?
Yes, thank you for asking that. First, let me apologize because the landscapers just showed up, as they always do when I'm in a webinar. So sorry about that. But the first thing I want to share is I put a link to our risk report in the chat. Now, Adrian, I know not everybody can access the chat, so I'm hoping you have a magic trick that you might be able to share this link with everyone.
Actually do. I'm gonna email each one of you that sign up. I'm gonna email you personally this report so you could have it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that. So you guys are seeing it first. We are actually not releasing this to the world until the tail end of the week, but because of this gracious invitation to be here with you, Adrian, and all of you folks who joined us, we went ahead and got this ready so you get a sneak advanced copy of our 2023 risk report. So thank you so much for all of you for being a part of this conversation. It really was a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation back, Adrian. We look forward to seeing you in Atlanta. And I'm really hoping that for everyone here, 2023 is a positive year. And I hope we can drive down employee turnover, because finding folks, I think, is continuing to challenge employers throughout 2023. So I really just feel very strongly that the best thing that we can do is take care of those existing employees and keep them satisfied and engaged, and look for ways to offer them opportunities within our own organizations so that they stick around. So I'm wishing you all success with that.
Jen, any closing thoughts?
Well, as Kara said, thank you so much for having us. And I think anything that we can do to just check in with employees, ask how they're doing. It doesn't have to be a formal conversation. And in fact, the casual conversations can often uncover the most useful and actionable things. So thanks for being here and for caring about your teams.
Yeah, Kara and Jen, thank you so much for making the time for us, sharing this great information with us. Thank you all for participating today, online, offline, text messages, via live questions. This is Multifamily Chronicles' third live event, and I hope to see you back here next Tuesday for our fourth live event. Have a great day, everybody.